Greetings and salutations, my fellow Tekken players. Today, I will be making a tier list of the strongest orbitals in the game. But before I start discussing tiers, I'd like to define what an orbital is. It may vary from person to person, but in my opinion, my viewpoint, an orbital is typically a safe mid that low crushes and is a combo starter on normal hit. Typically, they're between the frames of 23 to 30 frames to impact at the slowest. And they have different uses, from a panic button to a low crush to keep out, depending on the character. Even some characters can use their orbital as an Naoki tool. So it's a very versatile attack. And today, we're going to be breaking them down. My tier list takes into consideration speed, evasiveness, with recovery, and range. So starting at the very bottom of the tier list, we have Geese. He gets somewhat of a smaller combo, typically capping around maybe the high 50s without a wall, and the move is zero tracking. Like most orbitals, it's -9. He completely loses momentum, but it comes out at a solid 24 frames, which is pretty good. With a lack of combo damage and a strictly low crush, keeps it at only B tier. You could most likely burn some meter with this combo to get a little bit more damage out of it, but it's never really worth using your meter and extending a combo like this. 60, 59, 56, 54, whatever you get, it's good enough. Rounding off B tier, we have Rom. It's also another strictly low crushing orbital, and it has a pretty good range because of his size and his limbs. However, it comes out at 28 frames, which is a little bit on the slower side for an orbital, and it's -8. It's definitely usable. However, despite its impressive range, it lacks the properties to put it above some of the other orbitals that are on the list. But if you are using Rom, it is important to probably have this move somewhere in your repertoire, because he doesn't have many other worthwhile low crush moves in his arsenal. Now that we're done with B tier, we'll be moving into A tier. Starting with Shahim. He has a very vanilla orbital, but it gets the job done. It's low crush, it comes out at a reasonable 25 frames, and you can get a full, chunky, damaged combo out of it. But it lacks anything to put it over the edge, to push it to S tier. There's no type of evasion on it, there's no type of superior whiff recovery. It's just kind of just there. That's sort of Shaheen's identity. He's just sort of middle, all round at everything, and that's kind of, he has like a okay orbital, so it fits his character, honestly. But now, moving on to the next. Following Shaheen, we have Noctis. He has an orbital that's a bit on the slower side, coming out at 30 frames. However, it has the most range out of any other orbital in this game, hitting from well beyond range 3, actually range 4, as you can see. And it also hits grounded, and it leaves the enemy in a crouching position, limiting their options. He is -8, but he can still use his parry to catch any type of quick retaliation from a crouching position, like a while standing 4 or while standing, whatever fast while standing move an opponent may do. It's a very effective orbital, a versatile tool in the right situation, and it makes up for its slow speed due to all its uses. And for people mindlessly pressing buttons on block, Noctis, like I mentioned, has that parry that can stop retaliation. Overall, a powerful and unique orbital, landing it a position in A tier. Coming up next, we have Sergei Dragunov. Dragunov is on our list for a special reason: versatility. I know the meme is down 2 and while running 2, but Drag actually has a bunch of interesting tools beyond that. Up forward 4 gives a mini combo with some slight tracking, but it can be sidewalked. Despite that, you can still get a full combo on certain angles near the wall, and it gives you a floor break on floor break stages. It's a very versatile and powerful move. But that is not the only orbital-like move Dragunov has. He also has up forward 2, which is a bit on the slower side, coming out at 30 frames. But it can hit grounded, and it has fairly reasonable range. And it has, the same low crush window as most other orbitals, despite its slightly slower speed. Finally, he has a third orbital-like move. This one somewhat breaks my prior qualifications for it having to be a mid. However, it is a safe jumping launcher. The only thing that really stops it from being an orbital is that it's not a mid. But since he already has 2 other legitimate orbitals, I thought it would be, a crime not to mention it here as well. The next character I'd like to squeeze into this A tier is Harong. I don't know too much about this move because I do not use the character, but I have seen this move in action many times because Harong is a popular character. And I have seen this move go over things beyond lows. I've seen it jump over some mids. I mean, you can just see it in his animation. He does a very, very evasive maneuver with his kicks. So maybe it would be a little higher, but just because of its lack of range, and I think it has fairly bad recovery time, I don't really think it deserves to be in A tier because it's not super evasive and doesn't have crazy range. But I may be wrong. I don't know everything about this move. It may be an S tier orbital, or maybe it's a B tier. I'm not sure. Let me know if you guys know anything about Harong, and tell me what you think about this orbital in general. Does it belong in A, or is it not so great? Finally, last but not least, wrapping up A tier, we have Nina with her up forward 1. It's not very evasive, but one thing it does have is range. This thing can hit from range 3, and it boasts pretty impressive speed as well, coming out at about 26 frames. Faster than Noctis, and faster than Dragunov's, and just as not as long as range as Noctis, but it's still quite reliable. One great thing about this move that honestly I think may put it up to S tier, and one of the most interesting things about this move is probably the fact that it leaves you -5 in crouching. So Nina's turn is pretty much over after it's blocked, but not completely. She still has a few defensive options. Compared to a majority of the orbitals, they're closer to -8 or -9 on block. So this is very unique and very powerful. But the move only has forward momentum, so you can't use it as keep out. It's super linear, so even the slightest step to the left or right will get you out of the way, but that's typical for most orbitals. And the recovery is pretty rough when it whips, and the thing that's really holding it back from S tier is that it can't really evade highs, So it's a great move, very powerful, and if it had even any more evasion than it already has right now, if it was -3 or if it was any better, it would probably be S tier orbital level, but it's still a very strong A. Now we will start moving towards the S tier, the big boys, starting with the originator, the god of orbitals himself, Brian Fury. It is fairly short range, that needs to be noted, but it shines in its recovery and evasiveness. And due to these two things, it can be used as a keep out tool, unlike some of the other orbitals. Coming out at 24 frames, it's one of the faster orbitals in the game, and it's -5 on block. Like I mentioned with Nina, it's very powerful to be not -8 or -9, but -5. And unlike Nina, who's in full crouch, Brian is standing, so he also has access to his punch parry as well as sidestepping in both directions. I mean, it's a really amazing move, and it has a long active duration and keeps him in place at the same time. So it's just, amazing keep out tool. Of course, you don't want to be just whiffing it all day, but it can be done just out of the blue, just do it sometimes. There's just really no risk sometimes. And the bonus fact that all of the S tier orbitals can do is it evades highs. It has the power to evade highs, lows. I'm sure it has the power to evade some particular mids because it has he lifts his leg in a very peculiar manner. So it must be respected. Next up is Josie Resolve. The speed is a little bit on the slower side for her orbital at 28 frames, and the recovery on whiff could possibly be a little bit better, but this move can be done stationary, it can be done backwards, it can be done forward. Even though she doesn't have crazy movement in either direction, it's always good to have this ability with your orbital, being able to control the trajectory of where you can go with it. And beyond that, its most important attribute is the fact that it has the most insane crushing out of all the orbitals, casually dodging mids with lower hitboxes, as well as its design purpose of evading lows. And of course, you can get away from certain highs in some situations. It's a very good move with some insane evasive properties. Like in my video example here, I didn't even have to look very hard to create an example of Josie just hopping over mid. If it was a little faster, it could probably be on a tier of its own. But, being a little bit slower at 28 frames makes it somewhat, it has counterplay. Next up, it's the infamous Alexanderson Lars. A personal favorite over here on this channel. And just like Josie, he can also do it forward, he can do it backwards, and he can do it stationary, even though there's a bit of movement when he does it in place. It comes out at a solid 24 to 25 frames, and has the ability to evade jabs, which automatically kind of just puts you in S tier for an orbital that's meant to go over lows. It also has decent range, hitting just right before range 3 at 2.85 or so. I wish it could have a little bit more range, but it still probably is up there with some of the better ranged orbitals. It's for its speed, it's solid, and it's evasive. So it covers a number of different options. Reasonable reach, evasive, big combo damage. Overall, a pretty powerful orbital. It's like right there in the middle of the S tier. It's not too good, it's not too bad, but it's still pretty much above all the other orbitals I have listed so far. Outside of S tier, Brian and Josie still give it a run for its money. Brian arguably being better than probably the best. Now, time for the last but not least. Last but not least, we have the SSS tier Leroy Smith. Oh, well, at least he used to be before his orbital got nerfed. Before it got nerfed, it used to hit grounded, it used to have faster recovery on whiff, and it only used to be -3 on block, so it was still Leroy's turn, especially with the threat of that parry. But luckily at this point, it's been normalized. It still comes out at 21 frames, it still has some of the best high evasion out of the majority of the orbitals in the game, and it still has his godly parry if you try to mindlessly retaliate after you block it. But Jabs will stuff the parry because his parry is active on the 3rd frame, and he's -8 on block, so Jabs win. But of course, Leroy could opt for a crouch and then try to get you from there, and you know, there's still mind games that exist. But despite all those nerfs, he still has one of the best orbitals in the game. Pretty impressive, right? And that wraps up my orbital tier list for Tekken 7. A lot of people say there's quite a bit of homogenization within the move lists in Tekken, and everybody's getting the same moves over and over, this and that. But it's just like, you know, even within the same or similar like moves certain characters may have, there's still a lot of variance within them to make them, you know, different. There's like, you know, 10 or 11, 12 different characters that have orbitals, but for the most part, they all have the same initial function, but they all kind of serve those purposes a little bit differently, especially if you take into consideration the type of kits every character has. So yeah, I find it fun, you know, comparing and analyzing that kind of stuff, and hopefully you guys enjoyed my analyzation of these orbitals. There's another YouTuber by the name of IAMOP. He has a whole list showing some of the more evasive orbitals in the game in action with some very, you know, precise video demonstration, or Leroy, Lars, Josie, Brian, and they're all in there. So if you'd like some further visual representation of why the S tiers are S tier, I'm going to leave a link to IAMOP's video showing off those orbitals and their evasiveness. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and more is on the way, and I will see you all next time.